Taking advantage of vertical building opportunities in future cities I think will become a cornerstone to how they're built. Building up vertically and adding more levels to a city helps us create a pleasant and spacious environment, but also able to handle really high density. And some of the photos you're seeing here I'm using for inspiration. Welcome everybody to episode 2 of the newly named GeoCity, and I know that sounds a little bit corny, and it probably is. I could have gone with like a really beautiful name, which I was really keen on doing, but I don't know, there was something about GeoCity I really liked. That was just the working name of the city at the beginning. It's got 80s sci-fi movie written all over it, but yeah, I think I'm going to stick with it for now at least, unless you guys can give me a better name. I hope you guys are doing well. In today's episode, we are going to build heaps and heaps of things. You guys are going to be really spoiled here. I've tried to jam in as much content into this episode as I can. And we're going to begin with building that second level we talked about at the beginning. What you can see me doing here is making the bottom of that story. It's going to look like parts of it are floating. And I've used a massive pod vehicle with procedural objects and blown it up massive. This has got to be 100 times its normal size probably, but its nice curvy nature and the white crisp look of it is perfect to create the shell underneath this level. It's also going to be incorporated as well as I can into the rest of the city, so we're going to have those nice white flowing structures that link all the buildings and places together, and it's also going to be made out of similar materials we've seen around the rest of the city, so lots of grass surfaces and lots of glass. I've also got a pedestrian path coming up here, and if you've got a keen eye you'll notice I've run it directly up vertically through a glass tube, made the path invisible, and it kind of looks like the people are being vacuumed up to this top level, which is probably a bit silly really, but I think it's pretty cool. So with this second level I want to have a good part of it with the terrain raised up at the same level so that I can bring some roads and stuff up. They're going to be hidden, but bringing the roads up here means that I can place more houses and services just a lot easier, and they've got better access to the road network. The entire level is still going to look very much like it's floating just because of how I've sort of placed those blown up pod cars around the outside. So before I can extend that raised up terrain, I really need to at least finish off this part of the lake edge because the terrain's going to be raised up right next to where it's going to go. So the lake edge is really going to be quite simple. It's just going to follow some nice round curves and then come back out to a point where it's going to be left blank so I can carry on in future. Once I've got that bit of terrain raised up, I can finish the edge of that level with the blowing up pod cars and some nice flowing structures. I could have quite easily hidden all of the roads, but I kind of wanted to leave at least a couple exposed. And as much as I kind of wanted to do something special with the roads, I really shouldn't put too much emphasis on them because this city's not got an emphasis on roads at all. So the road itself is very no frills. The only thing I am doing is putting a glass tube around it which maybe contains the sound and anything else, maybe vibration or whatever. So essentially these roads will be pretty well dead quiet. This little wee area down here coming just outside of the biodome is really popular. There's a lot of people walking to and from here. There's heaps of houses inside the dome. I think this is a perfect area to have some sort of a park or monument. I downloaded a whole bunch off Steam, and this one here, I don't know what the hell it is, but it looks pretty futuristic. And these areas are really going to be quite simple. It's going to be the monument, some pavers, and some trees. That's pretty much it. One thing that I haven't really experimented much with in city skylines is bike networks and infrastructure dedicated solely to bicycles. So I'm going to put one in here. And not only is it going to follow some of the most beautiful paths in the city, it's going to be completely functional and it's going to be going in really handy spots. I'll also flick on a few policies that makes the citizens prefer bicycles, and I'm really happy when this is in. You can picture yourself biking along here, it's just beautiful. The network is going to end up quite complicated, so for now I'm just going to focus on one part of it and getting that all detailed and ready to go. This is going to have just as much reliance as the roads once it's all finished, so before I can do that detailing I need to make sure this is all in place perfectly. It's also being plumbed back into some of the networks that were existing, and I need to make sure all those connections are working. There's a spot here right on the corner of the lake that I think is begging for some sort of green space or park. It's going to be really simple. It'll have some nice round curvy grass patches and some nice tall big trees for some shade. In the first episode I created this glass structure here that I was intending on making into a commercial space. I didn't quite get around to it, so I'm going to come back and do that now. All these poor citizens have nowhere to go and blow money on things they don't need. I'm going to get some commercial block services, put them in here, hide them very carefully with some prop facades, and then run a pedestrian path in here so the citizens can come in and waste all their money. If you guys watched the last episode, you'll remember I put a pod station in so that I could plumb it into another station or a whole nother loop in future really easily. Well, I'm going to put that station down right now, and it's going to be a raised station which is about 10 meters above the road level, and I'm going to have it hovering directly over top of the road. There's also going to be a massive green space at exactly the same height as the station that flows off on the left hand side of it. This is going to have a pedestrian path that connects back into the rest of the city, and the park's also going to have another level that's higher than this that'll also be usable as well. Right, so that's pretty much everything tidied up around the edge of this second level. We can finally go back to building something on top of it. Because we raised that terrain up, it means I can bring a road in here, put a very simple loop on the end of it, remembering we're not actually going to see the road, so it's function over form. Once that's done, I'm placing a ton of residential cubes down. There ends up being about 700 homes up in this area. I've also added quite a few services on this road as well, because this is going to be quite a busy road, at least services wise, later on in the series. And to hide all of this, I add one of those curvy glass structures like we had in the first episode. The idea is just to try and make it look like a large apartment block. You can see that it's nice and round as well. It's got a green surface on the roof. Building like this gives me lots of options in future as well, which is great. So next I want to add a water feature up here, and I was toying with the idea of using props, but real water is just so much better, so this was a bit painstaking to put in. But it's worth it because we do some cool things with this. Later on in the series, I want to make it look like this part of the city is sort of starting to go up the side of a mountain range, which might explain why this water's just sort of springing out of nowhere. I want to have lots of pedestrian paths running around the edge of the lake. This is going to be a really cool showpiece. And just to make things really difficult for myself, I'm going to have another level above this as well. So I want to get all the pedestrian paths set up in a very similar fashion to how we did right at the beginning of the episode. This is going to be the first area in the city as well where I introduce a little bit of overgrowth. I like the idea of the city being quite established, and even though it's new, futuristic and modern, maybe some of it has been taken over a bit by that nature. Now, another cool thing I thought about doing up here was sort of adding some ancient ruins, whether they were existing here and they've built around them, or probably more than likely they've moved them in and they've just got them on display. I want to add a little bit of an ancient Rome theme to this part of the city just here. The next level up here is going to be dedicated solely to food production. Creating two surface networks, I'm going to create a cavity between them to create the level and fill it with a prop water. This is hopefully going to make it look like it's irrigating these fields we're going to put up here. We're also going to do something pretty cool with the runoff. I'm also hoping to make it look like we can get realistic workers up here, so I've got paths up here for access. Before we get to detailing those fields, we'll finish with the top surface, which is grass, and then we'll do something with the runoff of this water. I want to create a cool round waterfall sort of a feature, and maybe this is circulating back up and through as a filtration system, but this is going to be pretty heavily inspired by the Singapore airport, which has got something similar. Then I can shuffle all these paths into the right position, and then we can start finishing off those fields, and they're pretty simple really. I just use a decal and some trees around the edge of them, and that's pretty much it. Imagine you're walking to work in GeoCity one morning and there's just a really cool orchard on one part of the walk just off the side of the trail that you can dip into and grab any fruit you like free of charge. Well, that's exactly what I want to build here. This will pretty much become an extension of our food production area. So I've got this really ugly bit here where the water is flowing off from the top level, and at the moment it's just sort of making its way wherever it can, but I want to do something up here that's going to look cool and probably be fairly realistic. Maybe the water source for this area is coming from a spring, but the rest of this has been highly manipulated and sort of molded and shaped around the city as it makes its way down and out to the sea. Well, I'd really like to extend that idea and add like a futuristic hydrothermal dam here, or hydroelectric dam. Maybe it generates electricity the old-fashioned way, for lack of a better term, but perhaps the distribution of power to the city is wireless or something like that. So you can see we've got our main dam structure on the left hand side of the screen here, and the piece I'm working on at the moment is the flood control gate and the spillway. This is basically the gate that they can open and close electronically to control how much water is behind the dam and how much ultimately is being produced in power. Now, I also want to try and make it look beautiful, and this is going to be a real challenge. I'm a little bit of a nerd for this stuff, so naturally it's going to be beautiful to me, but I want to make this as beautiful as the rest of the city type of thing. So I'm at the very least trying to keep everything that nice white color or sort of futuristic looking. And I'm also trying to keep it as minimal as possible. I think in the future, simplicity is going to be a big part of how things are done. So for instance, rather than 3 or 4 gates, which you might see today, we've got one gate here, and maybe it's super strong, or it's made of materials that just allow it to do the job of 4. Or maybe I just can't be arsed doing 4 because I have to make it out of procedural objects. In any case, when that's done, I want to move on to putting some pedestrian paths in here because, of course, I want real citizens coming down through and over the dam. Whether they're workers down here or there's some sort of work zone, it's just not the same without people walking around. The turbines for the main power generation are going to sit underneath this bridge crossing over the channel. There's going to be 4 of those turbines all up, and we're going to have 4 feeder tubes feeding water down from the top of the dam into those turbines. And I don't know, maybe the rest of it's sort of hidden underground or whatever. Instead of putting antennas and little wires everywhere to capture and distribute that power, I've used just a weird looking metal structure, and maybe this is some kind of tuning fork. I don't know, it might power up one part of the atmosphere and create enough free power to run the city. In any case, I think it looks really, really cool. In only 2 episodes, we have made some serious progress. As much as I enjoy putting out heaps of jam-packed content for you guys, I'm also being very cautious not to rush the city and build places for the sake of it. I think the more thought that I put into these places, the better they come out. I mean, you would think that's pretty obvious, but sometimes it's really tempting to just rush an area. I'm going to try and maintain the highest standards I possibly can throughout the rest of the series. Thank you so much for stopping by and viewing this episode. If you're new, I would appreciate you liking the video and subscribing. The old algorithm is against me for some reason and I could just use a bit of help. But to everybody who's watched the video, including my current subscribers, thank you guys so much. You're all very much appreciated and your support means I keep going. I hope to see you guys on the next one. Take it easy. Peace.